Good evening, everyone. I'm your storyteller. I'm ready to take you through online dating tales that are strange and terrifying. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is. Sit down, breathe slowly, prepare yourself for the chills to creep in every moment. Episode 1: The Numberless Room. I was still standing in the hallway on the second floor of Black Pines Motel. The fluorescent light above kept flickering. It cast pale white-blue streaks across the stained, damp carpet. I had been here for 25 years. Since the night I fell onto the freezing floor and took my last breath. Tonight, a new group of guests stepped through the scratched glass door at the reception desk. The small bell hanging on the frame rang sharply. Its sound cut through the space usually filled only with wind and the gurgle of the wall-mounted air conditioner. Four girls, around 16 or 17, walked in, backpacks slung over their shoulders, hands pulling rolling suitcases that screeched against the tiles. The scent of cheap perfume mixed with stale cigarette smoke seeped into the walls. It reminded me of those damp summer nights here. The whole motel breathing a smell of moisture and smoke. The one in front had golden hair. Her eyes seemed eager to swallow every gaze around her. The other three giggled constantly. Their laughter echoed down the hallway, making the ceiling bulbs tremble as if jolted. I watched from the dark corner where the paint was peeling, where my eyes were now nothing but a cold blur. The receptionist, a thin man with ashen skin, handed them a key. A dull brass key, with the number 8 stamped on a chipped red plastic tag. The number swayed as they held it, clicking softly, like fingernails brushing metal. No one noticed that this key was unlike the others. It could open more than one door. As they walked down the hallway, the carpet released an old, damp smell, like wet newspaper buried too long in a basement. One girl coughed and joked to her friend that it smelled like a dead rat. I smiled in the dark. There had never been rats here. What they smelled were the remains of those who never left. The wheels of their suitcase bumped against the door of room 8. The click of the lock echoed clearly. The door opened. The hinges screamed. The dry metallic sound scraped my ears, like nails on glass. Cold air from inside poured out. It swept over me, carrying the stench of unwashed bedsheets and a faint trace of incense, as if it had just gone out minutes ago. The sheets were folded flat, impossibly neat, but I knew they hadn't been washed since the winter of 2001. They stepped in. The wooden floor creaked under their weight. Each step pressed down on the memories of those before them. In the mirror facing the door, their reflections were clear, but among the 4 youthful figures, mine stood at the far edge of the frame, unmoving, unblinking. No one noticed. No one ever did at first. Outside, wind from the parking lot slipped through the gap under the door of room 8. It carried the metallic dampness of coins, just pulled from water. They turned on the TV. The sharp chatter of a commercial rang out in a room that only knew wind and slamming doors. I stepped back. I melted into the dark corner of the hallway. I listened to their voices, the pop of a soda can opening, the hiss of fizz mixing with the sound of my heart, or what used to be my heart beating slowly in the hollow air. I knew tonight would not end normally, not because I guessed it, but because I had seen the door to the numberless room at the end of the hallway. It had cracked open when they passed by, and at Black Pines, that door only opens when it has chosen someone. I stood at the end of the hallway, right beside the dark wooden door with no number plate. Its peeling paint revealed deep black streaks beneath, like wood soaked in dried blood. I had stepped inside once. It was on the night I was still alive. I never walked out. There, laughter spilled from room 8, bleeding through the thin, paper-like wall. The smell of cheese-flavored snacks drifted into the hall. That greasy scent mixed with the sharp sweetness of perfume. The air was already thick, and now it felt suffocating. A soda can popped open. tearing the silence like a knife ripping cloth. I heard them talk about going to the pool tomorrow. They teased each other about men they met at a roadside diner. Their voices were bright and clear, but I knew, in just a few hours, those laughs would be swallowed by something else. When the wall clock had ticked its 1000th beat since they arrived, I saw one of them, the blonde girl named Rebecca, step out into the hallway. She yawned, bare feet touching the rough, damp carpet. I could almost feel the shiver running down her spine as the dusty fibers brushed her skin. She stood still for a moment, eyes scanning the hallway. I couldn't tell if she saw me, but her gaze lingered longer on the dark patch where I stood. A faint creak echoed. The door to the numberless room opened wider, as if pulled from the inside. No light spilled out, only a cold, sterile breath of air. It was so cold that I felt strands of wet hair stick to my temple, even without flesh to hold them. The smell poured out, heavy and suffocating rusted copper, stagnant rainwater, and a strange sweet rot, like fruit left to spoil for days. It clung to the throat, making every swallow feel like forcing down something thick and lukewarm. Rebecca tilted her head, eyes locked on the darkness inside. I could hear her heartbeat fast, urgent pounding. In the silence, like a drum struck without pause, a faint whisper came from inside the numberless room. The words were in no language I knew. The deep, low rhythm vibrated in my chest, like someone breathing against my ear with the chill of a crypt. She frowned, and, as if hypnotized, stepped toward it, in room 8. The TV still played its music. A soda can rolled across the floor, but no one called for Rebecca. The other 3 were still talking, unaware their friend was walking toward a door that shouldn't exist. I saw her hand tremble as she touched the edge of the door. The smell of old paint, damp dust, and mold poured out. It mixed with the lingering cheese and perfume on her skin, forming a stench so foul I wanted to step back, but she didn't. I knew that crossing that threshold meant no return. I had screamed before, tried to warn the others, but to them, my voice was only wind hissing. This time, I tried something different. I moved closer, right beside her. I pressed my lips to her ear and whispered, "Don't go in." The chill of my breath made her shiver. Her eyes blinked fast. Her hand pulled back slightly. But immediately, from inside the room, another hand, bony, pale, reached out. It brushed her wrist and tugged her toward the dark. Rebecca inhaled sharply. I heard that breath, and in its scent, I knew without doubt the metallic taste of fear was already flowing in her blood. Rebecca was pulled close to the doorway. The bony fingers tightened, joints cracking like dry twigs snapping. She tried to jerk away, but one foot had already stepped inside. The icy tiles sent a chill straight up her legs. It was like a stream of frozen water crawling through her veins. The smell from the room surged out stronger. It was no longer just mold and metal. It carried the stench of burned flesh, as if something with skin and fat had been roasted, the fire licking all the way down to the bone. That smell clung to the tongue. Every breath became a mouthful of thick smoke mixed with dried blood. Rebecca held her breath, but the cold still poured in through her nose. It slid into her lungs, heavy as mud. From inside, the darkness pushed forward twisted shapes. They had no real faces, yet faint pale glows marked where eyes should be. They moved slowly, each step making a sound like water dripping onto hollow wood. It echoed, steady, unbroken. I could hear them inhale, long, deep, and wet, as if they were drinking. In the scent of Rebecca, she trembled, trying to turn away. But the hand gripped harder, nails raking her skin. 4 deep grooves appeared, oozing dark red. The warm metallic scent of blood mingled with mold and char. The air grew so dense that even I felt as if I couldn't breathe, though I had no lungs. From room 8, a laugh rang out. It cut off suddenly, as if choked. The TV fell silent. The hallway sank into absolute stillness. Only Rebecca's frantic heartbeat remained, and the raspy breathing of the thing holding her. I knew I couldn't save her, but I still lunged forward, grabbing that wrist. My touch was like a cold wind, enough to slow it for a single beat. Rebecca used her last strength to yank herself free. She fell backward, hitting the carpet hard. The door slammed shut. The sound cracked the air like a lightning strike. The other 3 girls burst out of room 8. They rushed to lift Rebecca, voices frantic, but she only panted, eyes fixed on the door at the end of the hall. I stood between them and that door. I saw the narrow gap still leaking a stream of cold air. It felt like a long, regretful sigh. The next morning, the group left Black Pines Motel. The sun was out, but no light touched the hallway. Rebecca didn't say a word. When they got into the car, I saw the 4 grooves still carved into her wrist, fresh red, as if cut moments ago. She pulled her sleeve over them, but I knew the metallic scent would cling forever. Tonight, the numberless door still stands ajar. I once thought it chose at random. Now I know it doesn't choose. It waits, and once it has seen you, it will not forget. Episode 2. The neighbor who wasn't a victim. Wind from the highway hissed. It slipped through the cracked window. At the end of the Black Pines Motel hallway, it carried the stench of gasoline, mixed with burnt rubber. I drifted along. The row of rooms, ground floor, silent, then rapid knocking. From room 3, it wasn't the clumsy thump of a drunk guest, nor the mistake of someone at the wrong door. It was sharp, urgent, heavy, like a heartbeat in flight. Inside, Clara sat curled, up in bed, alone. TV light flickered on her face. She flinched. The knocking made the glass of water tremble. Ripples slapped the side of the cup. I could hear the sound clearly. She stepped to the door, peered through the peephole. In the dim yellow light stood a young woman, hair tangled, face streaked, with blood and bruises. The door opened. Warm metallic scent of blood poured in. It mixed with sour sweat and something strange, like wet iron. The woman almost stumbled inside. Her voice shook, hoarse, ragged. "Please, my boyfriend is going to kill me." Clara froze, panic in her eyes, and pity. I stood close, feeling the heat of the stranger's frantic breath. It carried cigarette smoke, and something else, something I knew too well, from when I was alive. Fear, laced with the scent of a lie. They left the room. Running toward the parking lot, flip-flops. Scraped, damp concrete. Car keys jingled in Clara's hand. I followed, silent. The cold draft I stirred brushed their necks. They didn't notice. The engine roared. Headlights tore through the thin fog. The car sped out of the lot. They stopped at a small motel, about 10 minutes from Black Pines. This place was newer. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the hallway, but it carried the same dim heaviness. The weight of a place meant only for passing through the night. Clara rented a room, led the woman inside. When the door closed, I felt the air shift. The scent of blood was still strong, but strangely, it wasn't coming from deep wounds. On her skin, there was only a small cut on her forehead, a slight swelling on her lip. The rest of the blood was smeared, across her blouse, across her skirt, as if she had fallen into someone else's pool of blood. Clara brought ice from the machine in the hall. The bag rattled. Cold mist dulled the metallic temps in the air. "We should call the police now," Clara said. Her voice trembled, but stayed firm. The woman smiled, lips curling slowly. "I already called. They'll be here soon." But I knew no call had been made. I drifted around her, stared into her eyes. There was no look of a victim there, only calculation, measuring every passing second. The air conditioner rattled. Each gust carried the scent of rust, pushing the smell of blood closer. Clara sipped her water, glanced at her phone. No signal. The woman looked at her, spoke softly, but clearly. "If he sees blood on your door, he'll know you helped me." And He will come for you." The words froze Clara in place. The scent of her worry rose, like heat from her skin, mixing with the damp metallic air in the room. About an hour later. The parking lot outside was still quiet. No police. No knock at the door. Only the steady drip from a leaky faucet. Each drop ringing, like metal hitting. Clara began to doubt. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts. The moment her finger touched the number 4911, a soft clatter sounded. The woman was standing right behind her. Eyes darkened. From the hem of her skirt, she drew a folding knife. The dull silver blade bore streaks of dried, brownish red. The smell of old blood instantly overpowered everything else. "Put the phone down now." Her voice was no longer shaky. It was firm, cold. Clara swallowed hard. It felt like swallowing. Liquid metal. I drifted around, pushed cold air toward Clara's face, hoping she would think clearly. She nodded, set the phone on the table. Her voice was low. "As long as you don't hurt me, get me to the border. If you don't," the knife lifted slightly, steel glinting under the yellow light. Clara pretended to agree, then said she was hungry, wanted to stop for food. They decided to order delivery. Clara quickly typed a note into the order. "Call police. Room 12. 15 minutes later. 2 delivery workers knocked on the door. When the woman opened it, light flashed from a gun barrel. The crackle of a taser split the air. She collapsed. The knife clattered to the floor, its dry metallic sound sharp in the room. Real police entered. The scent of blood flared as they explained. She had nearly stabbed her boyfriend to death. Before knocking on Clara's door, I watched Clara sink to the floor, cold sweat tracing her temple, her eyes vacant. When they led the woman away, her gaze slid toward me, and I realized she could see me. What if we had both died here? Episode 3. The Price to Buy a Soul. I'd watched hundreds of families walk into Black Pines Motel, but that family was different. The moment they opened the door to the reception desk, I smelled it. The scent of people who had never truly known fear. It was the smell of clothes, freshly washed with floral softener. The smell of pastry crumbs, still clinging to the fingers of 2 children. The faint trace of mint shampoo lingering in the mother's hair. Those 3 scents blended together. They spread like a halo in a room used to damp mold. Half-burnt cigarettes, and the metallic chill of old pipes. They came from Pittsburgh, carrying large suitcases, and a thrill I could see in every step. The mother, Linda, was about 35. She wore a blue denim jacket. Her brown hair was tied neatly, though a few strands fell across her cheeks. Beside her were twin girls, Amelia and June, about 8 years old. Their long black hair hung straight, round faces, eyes wide, as if pulling every image of the world inside. They wore matching plaid dresses. Each step moved in perfect sync, like rehearsing for a performance. I did not take my eyes off them when Linda accepted the key for room 5. The metal keychain struck the counter with a dry, cold sound. It echoed off the yellowed walls of the lobby. Linda took the key, nodded slightly to the receptionist, and led her daughters down the hallway. Their citrus perfume clung to the air. It pulled me along like an invisible thread. The next morning, sunlight slipped through room 5's curtain. It fell on the floor, but here at Black Pines, sunlight was always pale, like it had passed through a layer of gray dust. Linda led her daughters to the car. The engine started. Wheels rolled slowly across the parking lot, then turned toward the small town 3 miles away. I followed, drifting along the roadside. I heard sparrows. I heard wind brushing against the rusted signs of shops along Main Street. This town had only one large supermarket, sitting on a corner. Inside, the fluorescent lights glowed with a bluish tint. Each bulb trembled slightly whenever someone pushed a cart past. When they stepped in, the air shifted. The chill of air conditioning mixed with the plastic smell of shelves, soap from the toiletries aisle, warm bread from the hot food counter. The children ran ahead. Their tiny hands brushed the colorful candy wrappers. The crinkle of the packets rang sharply. Linda walked slower, her eyes scanning a folded shopping list. And then I saw him, a tall man with dark skin, a white turban wrapped around his head, a cream-colored long tunic, thick beard, black, unblinking eyes. He stood at the end of the aisle, staring at the children. That gaze was not curiosity or admiration. It was cold and deep, like a dried-up well, and I felt a damp hunger inside it, like the mud at the bottom. He moved slowly. His cart was almost empty, except for a bag of bread. Its plastic wheels scraped faintly against the tile, blending with the low hum of the air system. Every time Linda and the girls turned into another aisle, he appeared at the far end. His scent began to spread into the air around me. Sweat soaked deep into fabric, heavy cigarette smoke, and a sharp, sweet layer like burnt sugar. Amelia and June started to notice. Their eyes flicked toward him, then back to each other. Linda was still checking prices, unaware of the troubling repetition. I saw June lick her lips. They trembled, as if she wanted to speak, but she stayed silent. A moment later, they reached the checkout. The rubber conveyor belt hummed. Items slid toward the scanner. Linda opened her wallet and sighed when the total climbed higher than expected. That was when he came closer. His footsteps were heavy, each one pressed down with intent. The smell of sweat mixed with the faint tang of dried blood. I knew his hands had touched things they should never touch. He leaned down, voice deep and gravelly, with a low vibration. "They're beautiful. Are they yours?" Linda stepped back slightly. "Yes." He smiled. His yellowed teeth showed. Then came the next words, and the air thickened around us. "I have money. How much for both?" The scanner stopped beeping. The cashier, no more than 18, looked up, eyes wide. Linda stood still for a long beat. I felt her heartbeat quicken. Her breath grew warmer. The sharp scent of adrenaline spread. Amelia and June pressed in behind their mother. Their backs touched. Their breaths mingled into a thin cloud before their lips. The man stepped closer. His shadow covered the family under the cold fluorescent glow. His voice was soft, but certain. "Any price." I drifted in close, near enough to see the patterns in his iris, and I knew. Men like that never ask, only once. The man did not take his eyes off Linda. His hand rested on the handle of the shopping cart, knuckles large and coarse, veins raised, fingernails streaked with gray like machine oil. The smell from his body grew heavier as he leaned closer. Damp, stale clothes, worn for days, mixed with the thick stench of cigarettes, and the sharp, sweet breath of cheap liquor. I could feel it clinging to my face, sticking like a layer of cold grease. "I mean it," he said. "Any price. I'll take care of them." His voice dropped lower. Each word ground over stone, sharp, heavy. Linda swallowed hard. The scent of her tension spilled out, like the metallic smell from opening a long-forgotten tin can. She straightened, eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" He smiled, uneven teeth, several stained a dark brown. "I'll buy both, or just one. I'll pay now cash." The cashier slowly set the last item aside, not scanning it. The beeping of the scanner stopped, abrupt. The air around the checkout counter hollowed out. The two children pressed closer to their mother, clutching the hem of her denim jacket, eyes wide, but dry. They smelled him, the smell they had never known before, and their instincts understood. It was not a safe smell. I drifted behind him, looked down, his shoes' heels worn flat, leather, cracked, dusty, with dry earth. He had traveled far, leaving the same scent everywhere he went, the scent of a predator. Linda drew a deep breath. The clean scent of laundry soap on her jacket was still there, but drowned under the cold sweat of fear. "Stay away from my children," she said, her voice hoarse, but firm. The man gave a short laugh. The sound of a knife tapping lightly against the neck of a glass bottle. Relax. I'm only asking the price. June stepped back, her small back pressing into her sister's stomach. I could feel the tremor in their little muscles. They fought the urge to run. The faint mint of their shampoo brushed against the rot smell of him, clashing sharply. I saw his hand lift slightly from the cart handle, index and middle fingers pressed together, ready to touch Amelia's shoulder. At that exact moment, Linda turned, stepped between him and her child, her hand clenched around, the key to room 5 in her jacket pocket. I knew she could feel its chill, like a sharp piece of metal ready to strike back. He tilted his head slightly, black eyes fixed on the children. The hot, filthy scent of his hunger made me want to press my cold body against him, to let him know what real frost felt like. But I could only drift nearby, unseen by the living. Outside, through the glass doors, I caught the shadow of a police car turning into the lot. Blue and red light reflected across the supermarket ceiling, dancing between the aisles. Linda didn't know, but I saw the cashier had vanished into the staff room long ago, and had probably already called. The man still stood there, smiling, as if he didn't hear the heavy footsteps approaching from behind, and I knew in just a few seconds, his smell would be drowned out by the cold metal of guns, and the leather scent of a police holster. Asterisk, the sound of police footsteps stopped. Right behind the man, the scent of leather from the gun holster spread out, faint oil from the weapon, overpowering the suffocating stench he carried. A large, gloved hand clamped down on his shoulder, firm, unshaking. The officer's voice was deep, steady. Each word echoed in the air. "Sir, please turn around." He stood still for a second, then turned. The smile never left his face. Fluorescent light spilled down, revealing deep creases at the corners of his mouth. That burnt sweet smell of his breath still slipped into the space between Linda and me. The children pressed themselves even closer into their mother's back. "What's the matter, officer?" he asked, mockery in his tone. "We received a report of inappropriate conduct toward minors," the officer replied, his hand still gripping the man's shoulder. The man glanced at Linda, then at Amelia and June. The look lingered, slow, as if carving their faces into the back of his mind. I felt the cold current slide between him and the children, and realized it was me. I was blocking his gaze, so he couldn't see them any clearer. He chuckled softly, raised both hands behind his head. Just as the officer instructed, the sharp snap of handcuffs cut through the air, mingling with the tear of a receipt from the register. The cold metal smell of the cuffs coiled with the damp sweat on his skin. Linda held her children tight. Her hand trembled slightly. I could hear her heartbeat pounding, each beat trying to drive away the echo of his words. Amelia buried her face in her mother's shoulder, her breath hot and fast. June kept watching him being led away, her eyes locked, trying to understand what had just happened. The officer took him out the door. The steady thud of boots on tile faded. When the door swung open, exhaust fumes swept in from the lot, carrying that same burnt sweet scent. I knew it would cling to the children's memories for a long time. Linda paid quickly. The cashier's voice was small. "I'm sorry. I just had to be sure you and your kids were safe." Linda nodded. No words. She led the children to the car. On the drive back to Black Pines Motel, silence filled the cabin. Only the hum of the AC fan and the crunch of tires over gravelly drifted behind them. Watched Amelia and June sit close together, their wide eyes fixed on the passing window, as if searching for something beyond the blur of trees. That night, the light in room 5 stayed on late. Linda sat on the bed, holding her children, her gaze fixed on the window. She didn't see me in the corner, but I knew she felt someone watching over them. At Black Pines, not every spirit is cruel. Some, like me, remain to protect. But sometimes the price of keeping a soul safe from the living is far worse than death itself. Episode 4. The Song from Room 7. Rain had been falling since 3 in the afternoon. Drops hammered the tin roof of Black Pines Motel. The sound was steady, hollow, echoing through the empty pipes under the eaves. The air was heavy, with the smell of freshly turned soil. It mixed with the scent of rotting wood from the door frames, and the stale cigarette smoke still clinging to the carpet. When the silver sedan stopped in front of the lobby, I was already standing in the hallway, watching through the fogged glass. A thin man, about 40, stepped out first. Black hair, combed straight back, but the rain had pressed it flat against his scalp. His scent reached me before his figure did. Wet wool from his coat, printer's ink from freshly handled pages, a faint trace of bitter coffee, not yet cooled. Behind him came a young woman, around 20. She hugged her handbag tightly to her chest. Damp blonde hair clung to her cheeks in thin strands. The smell of chamomile shampoo lingered, blending with the cold, rainy wind, and something softer, the faint sweetness of an old instrument case. Like the inside of a violin box, shut for years. They took the key for room 7. The metallic jingle in his hand rang clear, sharper than the rain for a moment. When they passed me, his leather shoes struck the floor with heavy, measured steps. The woman moved faster. Her wet flats squelched softly, as if she wanted to get far away from here. Quickly, inside room 7, the air was colder than in the other rooms. The wallpaper was patterned with faded flowers. In one corner, the curtain had grown so pale, it was almost transparent. The dampness was deeper here, sinking into every thread of fabric, every crack in the wooden furniture. They turned on the light. The yellow glow pushed back some of the darkness, but it couldn't erase the feeling that something was standing just out of sight. Around 8 o'clock, I heard it. At first, only a few long drifting notes in the hallway. The singing wasn't loud. Each tone stretched, sliding through door gaps, through vent openings. It carried the taste of cold wind and thin mist, with a faint Thames-like stagnant pond water. The woman heard it first. She lifted her head, ears tilting toward the left wall, where the voice seemed to come from. Her eyes widened, her breathing shifted, from steady to quick. The man kept his head down, writing something. His pen scratched dryly over paper. The singing turned into words, not English, not any language I recognized. The sound brushed against skin like cold threads, drawn from collarbone to spine. Each word left a damp sensation, as if dipped in icy water, before pressing against the ear. She rose from her chair, stepped toward the wall. I followed close, catching the scent of her now. Rain drying slowly in her hair, a faint trace of sweat from tension, and fear beginning to bloom metallic, like coins rubbed hard between fingers. When her hand touched the wall, the singing stopped. The hallway fell silent. Only the ticking of the room's clock remained, but somewhere I still heard breathing. Long, deep, wet. It wasn't theirs, and I knew. Room 7 had chosen someone new. Asterisk around midnight, the rain outside had thinned, leaving only the monotonous drip from the gutter. Room 7 lay under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, a pale yellow circle of light pooling on the carpet, while every other corner was swallowed by darkness. The air was thick with the smell of damp carpet, long unwashed, the faint, acrid scent of melting plastic from the socket, and a trace of old coffee lingering in the metal filter on the corner table. The man sat with his back against the bed, reading over his notes. Each time he turned a page, the dry rasp of his fingertips against the edge of the paper sounded like someone tearing a threadbare cloth. The girl couldn't sleep. She lay on her side, eyes fixed on the wall where the singing had come from earlier. Her blonde hair had dried, yet still clung to the scent of rain and damp wood. Then the singing returned. This time, it was no longer distant. It came from deep within the wall, as if someone were singing between the bricks and the thin plywood. Layer each vibration seeping into the floorboards, making the bed frame tremble ever so slightly. The sound was smooth, slow, and seemed to be calling someone's name. In it was the temps of salt water, like a sea breeze, carrying the rotting moisture of long-sunken ships. The girl sat up. Her bare feet touched the carpet, and the damp chill crept into her soles, making her shiver. The man looked up. "You hear that?" "The singing," she said, her voice low but urgent. He frowned, stepped closer to the wall, pressed his ear to it, then stepped back, his hand trembling slightly. I could tell his scent had changed, the bitterness of coffee receding, replaced by the sharp, metallic temps of fresh sweat, like hot skin pressed against cold iron. The singing continued, clearer now, yet the words were still unplaceable, and though I had heard hundreds of tongues within black pines, I could not name this one. Its vowels stretched long, like wind whistling through a deep cavern. Its consonants struck dry and sharp, like stone on stone. Every syllable left a damp residue in the air, as if it did not just sound, but dripped unseen drops of water. Suddenly at the base of the wall came a faint clicking. The girl, startled, looked down and saw the narrow seam between wall and carpet lift slightly. Not the whole strip, just a thin line, enough for a draft to slip through. That breath of air carried the smell of rust, of rotted wood, and scent of wet human hair left unwashed for far too long. The man knelt, reached out, and touched the seam. The moment his fingertips made contact, the singing stopped, as if a hand had clamped over a mouth, mid-note. The silence that followed was not relief. It was heavy, stone-heavy, pressing against all three of our chests. Then, from that gap, a whisper came. It did not sing. It spoke. The sound was so soft it might have bloomed only inside the skull. Yet I knew they both heard it. "Open it." I drifted closer, feeling the cold draft brush against my skin. It was colder than any freezer, and within it I caught a scent that made me realize this was not the first time I had met the thing behind the wall of room 7. The man pulled his hand back, but it was too late. The gap at the base of the wall seemed to inhale. Then it swelled, once. The sound that came was not like wood or plaster breaking. It was like something damp and soft being torn apart. The carpet near the wall began to bulge in sections. It ran in a line, as if something was crawling underneath. A blast of cold air shot out. It struck the girl's face. She coughed softly, her eyes blinking rapidly. I could smell it clearly, the stench flooding out from that gap. The smell of human hair soaked in murky water. The scent of spoiled flesh, mixed with slimy, wet seaweed. It was so heavy the taste clung to the tongue, salty and bitter, like drinking seawater that had already rotted. Then the singing returned, this time right beside their ears. No longer from inside the wall, but from the empty space behind them. The man whipped around. He saw only the room, the pale yellow light trembling, as if a breeze had touched it. The singing shifted to a lower tone, steady, like a lullaby's rhythm, but each beat pulled consciousness down into the deep. The girl backed away, her back pressed against the wall. Her hand clutched the wallpaper. At once, the wallpaper wrinkled. It was soaked, cold, as if pressed against a block of ice. From within the wet paper, a small hand reached out. Its skin was deathly pale. The fingers were long. The nails had turned a sickly yellow dot. It touched the girl's wrist, left a deep purple indentation, like a burn from the cold. The man grabbed her arm and pulled hard, but the pale hand tightened its grip. The singing broke into a series of high, thin screams, like glass cracking right inside the ear. I rushed forward. I passed through the wall. Inside was not an empty cavity. It was water. Black water. Bottomless dot in it floated shapes, human shapes, still singing. Every open mouth released bubbles, and every bubble carried a frozen, echoing note. I knew them. They were the ones who had once been here, who had once died here. Now, they had merged into one will, and they wanted more. I forced myself outward, struck the pale hand with a blast of cold, so sharp its skin cracked. In that brief moment, the man yanked the girl free from the wall. They fell together onto the carpet, gasping. The gap closed instantly. The wallpaper smoothed out, but it was still soaked. Drops of dark brown water dripped onto the floor. The singing stopped. The air in the room was heavy, like a storm that hadn't yet broken. The salt, bitter smell still clung to their skin. I knew it would not fade with just one bath. They left Black Pines the very next morning. Neither dared glance toward room 7, but I knew. In her sleep, when the rain began to fall, the girl would hear the singing again, because when a wall has once opened for you, it remembers your voice, and one day it will sing to bring you back. Episode 5: The Unlocked Door. The autumn wind swept through the row of black pines. They stood behind Black Pines Motel. The wind carried the sharp scent of raw pine sap. It mingled with damp earth and a faint trace of smoke from some distant fire. That night, there was no rain. The sky lay open, yet the stars were swallowed by thick gray clouds, heavy as soaked cotton. From the first floor hallway, I saw a truck, a small green pickup. It turned into the parking lot. The headlights swept across the motel's facade. The windows flared briefly, like someone had just opened their eyes. The man driving stepped out first. He looked to be around 50. Messy, salt-streaked hair. The smell of gasoline clung to his coat. Machine oil, heavy and stubborn. His hands were cracked, nails darkened with grease. They radiated the scent of metal and dried sweat. He opened the passenger door, helped a boy down from the seat. The boy looked about 10, thin, messy blonde hair, a worn-out red hoodie, frayed at the shoulders. His scent was different: peppermint candy, dry clay, and the faint smell of notebook paper. They checked into room 2. When the door closed, I still sensed their steps. The man walked slow, heavy. The boy's steps were quick, like he was trying to escape an orbit he knew, but could never break free from. Room 2 was one of the oldest. Its wooden door had faded to dull gray, the bottom edge worn thin, splintered fibers showing. The brass handle was cold to the touch. It left a metallic temps on your fingers. Inside, a double bed with beige sheets, yellow stains, aged and old. A rickety wooden table, and in the far left corner, a sliding door wardrobe. I knew that wardrobe hid a gap, a narrow space, leading into the empty dark between rooms. As soon as they entered, I noticed something. The door wasn't locked. The man only pulled it shut, lightly. The latch stayed open. No lock, inside or out. When the hallway wind slipped through, the door shivered, creaking softly, the way it does when someone outside tests the push from the other side. Around 9 that night, I heard footsteps. Small, the boy's. He stood in the doorway, staring at the empty parking lot. The wind tossed strands of his blonde hair. He didn't know I was beside him, but I could feel his unease. Sweat, faint but sharp, twisted with peppermint sweetness, and just a trace of bitter salt from tears that hadn't fallen. At the far end of the hallway, room 6's door was cracked open. No one had stayed there for months. The light inside was dim, smoky, and I heard a sound. 3 slow taps, perfectly even, like fingernails, tapping on wood. The boy tilted his head, curiosity in his eyes, but he stayed where he was. From the gap in room 6's door, a voice drifted out, low, slightly hoarse, as though speaking through water. "Come here." The air sank, heavy, wrapped in thick fog. I knew what waited behind that door. Not a person, not a ghost, at least not the way people imagine. It was a breathing emptiness, one that could call, one that could lock away. Whatever it swallowed. The boy hesitated, then his foot slid forward. I pulled back, preparing, because once a door is unlocked, It will always find a way. To open wider, asterisk the boy took another step. His foot sank into the damp carpet, a soft thump. This part of the hallway always kept scents, the ones left by those who had passed. Cigarette smoke, stale sweat, blood dried long ago. The smell lingered. It curled around the boy's ankles, like invisible rope. The door to room 6 opened wider. Inside, the darkness thickened. It swallowed every edge, every shape. A smell poured out, mildew-soaked walls, damp wood, aged for decades. A warm metallic temps, like the scent of an animal, left to rot in a sealed room. The voice came again, deep, rough, clearer now. "Come in, we can talk." The boy's foot trembled. He turned to wardroom 2. Inside, the man still sat motionless on the bed, eyes fixed on the TV screen. From the TV came fake laughter, a sitcom laugh track. It could never blend into this air. He had no idea the boy was outside. I moved forward. I stood between the boy and the door. My cold breath brushed his neck. The hairs rose. The boy hesitated, but the thing in room 6 knew exactly how to draw prey closer. From the darkness, a hand slid out, pale, fingers long, joints stiff, nails yellowed, like they had soaked in water for too long. The hand didn't wave. It stayed there, palm open, as if waiting to receive. I heard breathing from inside, long, deep, foul. It carried the salty temps of sea wind, mixed with swamp mud and the sharp sting of metal. That breath slid over the skin, leaving a damp, sticky trace. The boy leaned toward it, his gaze lost focus. The voice dripped into his ear. "No air between them. It's safer here. No one will hurt you anymore." I knew it was bait. That thing always knew what you longed to hear. It spoke with the voice of memories you didn't dare touch. The boy lifted his hand, inches from the pale one, just before his fingertips met. I shoved him back, hard. He fell onto the carpet, eyes wide, panic flooding in. The door to room 6 slammed shut, a metallic thud. The man from room 2 poked his head out, frowning. "What are you doing out here? Get inside." The boy shuffled in, head low, but I saw it. In his eyes, the image of that pale hand still lingered, and deep in his mind, the invitation had not disappeared. Asterisk that night, the wind changed direction. It blew from the pine forest. I heard metal vibrating softly in the hallway, like someone testing many doorknobs, quietly, one after another. The cold scent of night mist seeped in. It mixed with rotting wood. It came from the damp door frames. In room 2, the man slept deeply. He snored evenly. Cheap alcohol leaked from every breath. The boy lay facing the wall, eyes wide open. His small hand clutched the blanket's edge. His fingers trembled. The voice began again. This time, not from room 6. It came from right outside the door to room 2, soft, as if someone stood close, speaking through the wood. "You don't need to knock. Just open it." Its smell seeped into the room, much stronger now. Pond mud stirred. From the depths, dried moss wet again. And beneath it all, the smell of raw flesh, unwashed of blood. The door shivered. The hinges groaned. Pressed from outside, I drifted into the hallway. Every door was slightly ajar, as if they waited for someone to step out. The knob of room 2 turned, slowly, by itself. I rushed forward. I forced a wave of cold into the lock. The knob stopped, then a soft click. Only I could hear it. The door opened a hand's width. The darkness outside thickened. It pressed toward the gap. From it, the pale hand slithered in. The boy sat up sharply. His eyes glowed in the dark. Not the light of life, the reflection of something, looking in from outside. The voice changed its tone, gentle, almost lulling. "Come out. We will go somewhere else. No one will ever find you there." I moved close. I circled between the hand and the boy. The feeling from that hand pulled at me. It was like sinking to the bottom of a cold lake. Pressure closing in from every side. Images flashed. Long waterlogged hallways. Doors sealed shut. Pale children's faces peering through cracks. From the other side, I shouted, not with sound, but with force. I slammed the door shut. The sound rang through the hallway. Every other door slammed shut with it. The man startled awake. He yelled at the boy. He never knew. The boy had just escaped something ready to swallow him whole. I looked at the boy one last time before leaving. In the dim light, he still stared at the door. His lips moved faintly, repeating the invitation. And I knew Black Pines never gave up. Once it had chosen someone, the door would open again. Once it was sure, no one was watching. Episode 6. The One in the Mirror. Black Pines Motel had 7 rooms, but only one room had a full-length mirror. A wall mirror in an ebony frame. Room 4. That mirror had been here longer than I had, and it did not reflect everything the way it should. That night, the sky was full of clouds. Moonlight slipped through in small gaps. It spread over the yard in a thin, silvery dust. Around 9 p.m., a black sedan stopped in front of the lobby. A young woman stepped out first. Black leather jacket, skinny jeans, worn high heels. Her perfume was strong, sharply sweet, but beneath it, I caught the stale scent of cigarette smoke in her hair. The man with her was much taller, dark brown hair, a tired face. His smell was beer, sweat, and something faintly sweet, yet sour, like old syrup. They took room 4. When the door opened, the air changed. The long-standing dampness from the carpet and wood mixed with the scent of aged wood glue. The wall mirror stood right opposite the door. It reflected the hallway behind them. I stood at an angle. The image in the mirror didn't quite match. The man's foot stepped inside. Before he actually moved, they didn't notice. The woman set her bag on the bed, pulled out her phone. The screen threw a white glow across her face. The man turned on the TV. The news channel spoke in a flat tone. The announcer's voice blended with the rattling fan. But in the mirror, beyond their reflections, I saw another shadow, standing in the corner. It had no clear shape, just a darkness, deeper than the dark, and the eyes 2 faint points of light, like distant headlights. Through fog. The woman glanced at the mirror by chance. She froze for a second. She walked closer. Her perfume mixed with the fine dust rising from the wooden frame. She touched it. Her palm left a faint mark on the cold surface, and I felt it. That cold did not come from the glass. It came from the other side. The man called her, pulled her away, but only minutes later, she glanced at the mirror again. This time the eyes in the shadow were looking straight at her. I knew this sign. Once it chose someone, the mirror would no longer just reflect. It would open, and when it opened, not everyone who entered came back. Almost midnight. The TV was already off. Only the steady spin of the fan remained, its blades knocking against the guard with a slow tick, tick. The light from the table lamp spilled onto the mirror, creating a pale glow in the center, and strips of darkness on each side, like the frame of a doorway. The woman lay on her side, facing the mirror. The man was asleep, his breathing deep, carrying the stale scent of old beer. I drifted near the ceiling and saw the reflection begin to shift. The shadow inside was closer now, only a few steps from the edge of the frame. Its faintly glowing eyes never left her. The air in the room changed its scent. Her perfume faded. In its place came the metallic temps of wet copper coins, mixed with the smell of damp, rotting wood. A thin but stubborn cold spread out, threading through every fiber of the blanket and her clothes. She propped herself up on one elbow in the dim light. Her eyes reflected the same pale, misty gleam as in the mirror. She stepped barefoot onto the carpet. The carpet's chill and slight dampness made her shiver, but her steps still carried her toward the ebony frame. I heard the mirror breathe, not an ordinary sound, but the hiss of a thin mist, clinging to the glass, rising and falling like a veil over a mouth. Each time it inhaled, the room's light dimmed slightly. Each time it exhaled, a cold draft struck her face, carrying the salty, rank scent of stagnant pond water. She touched the mirror. This time there was no hard surface. Her fingertips sank in, as if passing through a layer of icy water. Droplets clung to her skin, sliding down the back of her hand, leaving a thin, slick trail smelling of river moss. The shadow in the mirror reached out. Its fingers were long, nails cloudy and dull, and just as they neared each other, I felt the pressure in the air shift, like the heavy stillness before a storm, when everything waits to snap. The man on the bed rolled over, but did not open his eyes. In the mirror, the shadow tilted its head, its mouth curving into something that was not a smile. From where a mouth should have been, a low murmur poured out, unclear whether it was speech or water running through stone cracks. But I knew what it meant. Step inside. I drifted down, trying to block them, but the mirror's surface was rippling harder now. There was not much time left before it truly opened. Asterisk when her hand and the shadow's hand were only inches apart. The mirror shuddered once, like the surface of a lake, struck by a stone. The murmur inside thickened. It became a dense, buzzing hum. It pressed down on the room, as if someone had stuffed wet cotton into my ears. I pushed closer, trying to block the cold pull, dragging her forward. But the force from the other side was so strong, the carpet beneath her feet puckered, wrinkled under the strain. The room's scent shifted, heavy, damp moss, mixed with the temps of rust and the rank smell of hair. Long soaked in water, the salty, metallic taste clung to my tongue, like breathing in the air from a pit full of dead fish. The man on the bed opened his eyes. Suddenly, he saw her, standing flush against the mirror. Her hand nearly vanished into the glass. He leaped up, called her name, his voice hoarse from sleep, but she didn't turn. In the mirror, the shadow now stood right at the frame. Its eyes burned brighter. From the corners of those eyes, thick black streaks began to ooze, dripping slowly into the darkness at its feet. He rushed forward, grabbed her shoulders, yanked hard. It was like pulling someone out of deep mud. Her whole body jerked, then slid a few more inches. Into the mirror, gritting his teeth, he stepped back, pulled again. I poured all my strength into the cold space between them and the mirror. In that instant, the glass vibrated violently. The light in the room flickered. Then, a faint cracking sound. A thin fracture ran from the top edge of the mirror, down toward its center. Inside, the shadow recoiled. Its eyes vanished into the dark. The pull stopped. Abruptly, both of them collapsed onto the carpet. Breathing hard, the mirror lay still again, but from the fracture, a drop of black water slid down. It fell onto the ebony frame, staining it with a dark bloom. The man held her tightly, fired questions at her, but she only trembled, her gaze locked on the mirror. I knew why. In the deepest shadow, between the shards of reflection, those faint glowing eyes still watched, not from the other side anymore, but already inside the mirror, waiting for the next moment to open. And at Black Pines, motel mirrors never just reflect, they are doors. And now, a hand knows how to open one. Episode 7, The Sound Beneath the Floor. The first floor of Black Pines Motel was laid with dark wooden planks, the kind that had soaked up the forest's damp breath. For decades, I knew every sound they made. The faint groan under a heavy step, the soft creak when the night air shifted temperature. But that night, what came from beneath the floor wasn't the sound of wood. It was knocking. It started around 8 p.m. I heard it while drifting down the hallway. 3 beats, steady, coming from directly beneath my feet. The crawl space under the floor was barely wide enough for pipes and wiring. No person could fit there. Yet the sound was sharp, clear, as if someone were tapping the wood from below with the tips of their fingers. Around 9 o'clock, a silver SUV stopped in front of the lobby. A man in his 40s stepped out, wearing a gray fleece jacket. He smelled of cold wind, mixed with cheap body spray, but on his collar lingered the sharp, metallic temps of pennies. With him was a girl, about 8 years old, brown hair tied into 2 pigtails. The scent of peanut butter candy wafted from the pocket of her hoodie. They took room 1, the corner room at the end of the hall, where the wooden floor met the outer wall. When they opened the door, the knocking under the floor paused, as if listening. But when the man set his suitcase down and the girl stepped inside, it started again, this time right by the edge of the bed. The man didn't hear it. Only the girl froze, tilted her head. "Dad, is someone under there?" "Probably the pipes," he said. Without looking up, I glanced toward the narrow gap, where a loose plank met the base of the wall. From it, a cold draft spilled out, carrying the scent of wet earth and something sickly sweet, like wilted flowers, steeped too long in sugar water. The girl knelt, pressed her ear to the floor. I saw goosebumps rise along her cheek as the cold touched her skin. The knocking changed, now only a single beat, then silence, then another beat, like it was echoing her heartbeat. Her eyes fixed on the gap between the boards, and that's when I realized in the darkness there, an eyeball was staring back up. I knew then, beneath the floors of black pines, there weren't just wires and pipes. Something had been there for a very long time, waiting for someone to hear it and knock back. She lay flat on the floor, cheek pressed against the wood, her brown hair spilling loose, the smell of peanut butter candy from her hoodie pocket mixing with the damp, cold scent rising up. I heard her soft breathing, slipping in between the silences as she listened. The knocking beneath the floor changed rhythm. It was no longer monotonous, but a pattern of fast, slow, fast, like it was trying to say something. I didn't know the language, but I recognized the beat, an invitation it had called to others before. The girl lifted her head, her eyes bright with curiosity. She tapped her fingertips against the floor, 3 small knocks, evenly spaced at once. The floor beneath her answered, 3 identical knocks, but so close now, they seemed to come from just under the wood. A sharp draft surged up through the plank gap, cold and wet enough to bead moisture in her hair. The smell of mud grew heavier, this time laced with the metallic temps of iron and the scorched stench of burnt human hair. I saw the fine hairs on her arms stand upright. The man, her father, was still rummaging through his suitcase, paying no attention. I was about to intervene when the loosest plank shifted slightly, giving a faint creak as if pushed from below. The girl slid her fingers into the gap, trying to pull the board free. I swept closer to the floor, my chill making her flinch, but too late. A finger slid up from the darkness, long, deathly pale, skin stretched tight and glossy like wax. Nail, Yellowed. It scraped gently at the plank's edge, producing a high, shrill squeal like metal clawing against glass. The girl's eyes went wide, but she didn't scream. Instead, she leaned closer, as if hypnotized. In the shadowed gap, the eyeball appeared again, and this time, just above it, the white curve of a mouth curling upward. I knew if that plank came loose entirely, the space beneath would not stay its normal size. It would open wide enough to swallow a child whole, and once you were down there, no one would ever hear your knocking again. The loose plank trembled, shedding fine black dust that clung to the girl's hands. The knocking was no longer steady. It came rapid now, echoing from all beneath the floor, as though many hands were beating against the wood at once, creating a frantic rhythm, like the heartbeat of someone running in fear. The Man still heard nothing. He was bent over his phone, the cold blue glow washing over his tired face. The sour smell of his sweat mixed with the damp, muddy air flooding the room, forming a thick, heavy blend that clung to the atmosphere. The pale finger from the gap curled in, hooking over the edge of the plank. A sharp crack rang out as the wood split, and a black opening tore wide. From below, a rush of cold air surged upward, carrying the metallic tang of old blood and the rank stench of flesh soaked too long in stagnant water. I could taste it, salty, acrid, even without lungs to breathe. In the darkness beneath the floor, pairs of eyes began to glimmer, small and round like a rat's, but with a hard, icy stare. They moved together, catching the faint light from the gap like dirty glass. Beads dot, then more hands emerged, thin, long, skin stretched tight and glossy, nails yellow, all reaching upward at once, pressing against the floorboards from every direction. The girl stood, frozen in place. The peanut butter scent on her hoodie now seemed lost among the choking reek of blood. One hand slid higher, touching her ankle, leaving behind a damp, icy trail that made her skin bristle. I hurled myself into the gap, forcing every ounce of my cold into it. The hands recoiled, but only slightly. They weren't afraid of me. They were simply waiting for me to weaken, and I could see, deep below, narrow, wet clay tunnels, leading into a bottomless dark, where hunched figures crouched, faces chalk white, eyes hollow, forever tapping at the dirt ceiling above them. The man finally noticed. He lunged forward, snatching his daughter, pulling her back hard. The plank slammed shut into place with a dry thump, but even as he held her close, the knocking started again, this time directly beneath where he stood. He held her tighter, but I knew beneath the floors of black pines, those hands had never given up their prey. They were only waiting for another night, when the knocking would once again be answered. Episode 8, The Night Without an Exit. Black Pines Motel had always lived on isolated stories, one room, one soul, one death. Then it happened again. But this night was different. I knew it the moment the wind changed direction. It blew from the pine forest, down the valley. It carried the scent of everything ever kept here. Cold moss, burnt hair, flesh left too long in water, and blood dried into rusty iron dot. I drifted along the hallway and saw the rules breaking. The door of room 4, where the full-length mirror stood, shivered lightly, though there was no wind. The door of room 6, where the pale hand once reached, out opened just enough for darkness to spill through. The carpet in front of room 1 swelled slightly, as if something crawled just beneath the wooden floorboards. Everything was moving at once. That night, Black Pines had 4 guests. A middle-aged man in room 4, a woman and her son in room 6, a young couple in room 1. They knew nothing about each other, but each of them was stepping closer to a different trap, and I, the one who had wandered here too long, began to feel the shift in every direction at the same time. The air grew heavier, like drinking thick, cold mist. With every step, I caught the salty, metallic scent from the mirror, the damp, rotten odor from room 6, the smell of mud and sweat rising from beneath the floor. Every sense was stretched tight. It felt like all parts of this place were touching me at once, pulling me toward the center dot around midnight. All the doors burst open at once. The sound echoed like wood snapping, startling the living inside. The man in room 4 switched on the light. In the mirror, the shadow was no longer still. It stepped out. From the reflection, bare feet touched the carpet, leaving faint wet prints with the smell of pondweed. With each step, cold air spread out, raising the hairs on my arms. Though I had no flesh left, in room 6, the pale hand slid all the way in. It gripped the boy's wrist, leaving an icy imprint that kept him from pulling away. A voice from the pitch dark whispered into his ear, "No one else is here, only me." Room 1 trembled. The floorboards snapped open, and the black gap beneath widened like the mouth of a well. Cold air surged upward, so strong that tiny droplets clung to the wife's hair, weighing each strand down. The smell in the hallway turned into something inseparable, sweet, metallic, damp, moldy. Burnt. Its taste clung to everything, making the living feel as if they were chewing mud mixed with blood. I tried to move quickly between rooms, but this time, every force in Black Pines seemed united. Whenever I touched one hand or one shadow, something else pulled from another direction. I couldn't save anyone completely, only keep them from being swallowed whole. I had no choice but to pull everyone to one place, the main lobby. That was where the front door stood. It would only open if everything inside Black Pines was pushed back at the same time. They ran toward it, eyes wide with panic. Behind them, the mirror in room 4 tipped over. It slammed onto the floor and spilled thick black water. From that water, the shadow figure rose. The door of room 6 burst open. Dozens of pale hands shot out at once. Yellowed nails scraped the floor, leaving deep grooves. The floor of room 1 swelled upward. Hands crawled from beneath like the legs of a giant spider. I poured all my cold breath into those pulling forces. That chill spread across the floor, carrying my own scent. Night mist mixed with pine. It was a signal to everything here that I belonged to this place. They hesitated, but only for a few seconds. The man from room 4 reached the door first. When his hand gripped the metal handle, I felt the warmth of the living flow through. It was pulled back immediately. I pushed hard, and the door swung open. The night air rushed in, the scent of the outside world, dry, cold, free, cut through all the damp, rotten smells inside. They ran out. No one looked back. I stood in the doorway, staring into the empty hallway behind. The room doors shut, one by one. The locks clicked in a steady rhythm. Everything was quiet, again, as if nothing had happened, except for one thing, the trail of black water staining the carpet. It stretched from room 4, all the way to the front door. It had not dried. I knew Black Pines would not stop. It had only given me and them one night of rest before the cycle began again. But for the first time in many years, I felt something strange. The warmth from outside still lingered on the doorway. It was a reminder that not everything belonged to the dark, and I silently hoped that when this place finally chose me again, someone would be standing at the threshold to pull me out.